It's very different from having wishful fantasies or be doing some daydreaming. It's an inner travel comparable to the space travel.
Pioneering consciousness researcher Stanislav Grof has spent more than 4 decades researching the science of the ancient shamans. He says shamans also used breathing techniques to alter their consciousness. He teaches modern travelers to produce a mild form of oxygen deprivation in the brain, similar to that experienced by climbers at high altitudes. Grof believes the non-ordinary states this can produce were a fundamental part of all ancient cultures.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, irrational seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into controversial topics that some may call new age or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will hopefully encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers. So this is episode 1 of The Seeker and The Skeptic, and we're going to be talking about holotropic breathwork, something that me and Rebecca have both had experience of, but only now are we going to dive deep into what it's really about.
That's holotropic breathwork TM.
Oh,
they're quite litigious.
Is who trademarked it?
Well, this guy called Stanislav Grof and his wife Christina Grof invented it. But what the experience we had, which we're going to talk a bit about later, was called psychedelic breathwork, I think.
They dodged it.
Yeah, but it's obviously inspired by. So what it is, basically, is everyone's known for a long time that your breath affects how you feel. That's why you have like pranayama and yoga, where you breathe in a certain pattern. I mean, you've probably done that, right?
Yeah, I've actually explored a few different types of breathwork in yoga. So some of them are more annoying than others. Don't know if you've done alternate nostril breathing.
I love alternate nostril breathing.
So I've recently come to see that it does have some good effects, and it's not just a matter of coordinating yourself while your yoga teacher is seems very able to do this thing. So is this similar?
Well, it's kind of drawing from the same idea. The idea is your breath affects how you feel. So a lot of different things have been developed out of this basic idea. One of them is pranayama, and there's loads of Kundalini yoga is quite interesting, where you have to do like lots of very strange breaths that sort of make you feel strange. And this is one of those types of breath that make you feel strange. So what you do is you breathe out a really big breath, and then you breathe in a natural breath. And the trick is to eliminate the gap in between those two things. So there's no pause. Naturally, you would breathe in, take a moment, breathe out. In holotropic breathing, you want to get rid of that gap altogether. And you do this all with your mouth wide open, breathing out as hard as you can, which is a really strange experience. And the idea is that when you breathe that way, you become slightly deficit in carbon dioxide. Right. And this does strange things to your brain.
Okay, so it's just carbon dioxide. That's you're kind of depleting yourself of that, which I thought we were always doing when we were breathing.
Yes, we are. But what carbon dioxide does is it triggers your body to know to take another breath. This is one of the reasons why you have to keep reminding yourself to breathe when you're doing holotropic breathing, because your deficit in carbon dioxide, you don't have enough storing up in your lungs to tell you need to take that next step.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and when you have a carbon dioxide deficit, your blood pH level goes up, which causes what they call respiratory alkalosis, which basically causes a whole bunch of physical effects, including muscle spasms, tetany, which is the claw, which we'll talk about later. I had experience of the claw, and some brain effects as well. So it makes you feel high, basically.
Right. And would there be any, I don't know if this is something that you know about, but is there any reason for us to have these effects? Like biologically, is it because if our ancestors started doing this, started experimenting, they'd basically pass out, or like bad things would happen? Are these kind of effects that our bodies are trying to get us to know that we're depleting ourselves of carbon dioxide?
I don't know, because I would have thought, like, you have your body naturally tells you when you need to take another breath.
Yeah.
I don't think all the strange experiences that you have when you're doing holotropic breathing would necessarily cue you that you need to stop doing it.
Sure.
It might just be one of those happy accidents or unhappy accidents,
Right.
depending on your experience. It's just something strange our bodies do when we breathe this way.
Yes.
And in holotropic breath work, we do this all lying on the floor, sometimes on mattresses. We did ours on yoga mats, and with lots of people around us, and with really loud music. That's an important part of the process, which Stanislav Grof talks about. And they're very specific about the types of music that should be used.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about Stanislav Grof.
So he's a guy who was really into LSD, which why not, I guess.
No surprises
This
there.
is like the 60s and the 70s. He's doing a lot of research in Freudian psychotherapy and seeing what he can achieve by getting people high when he gives them therapy. And then those pesky lawmakers made that more difficult for him. So he wanted to find a way to give people a high that was legal, which is why he started experimenting with his wife, as you do, and also with holotropic breathwork. Well, with different breathworks, with pranayama, all sorts of things. And they messed around until they found this specific technique. And one of the reasons I pointed out is trademarked is he doesn't. I read their book. What was it called? Holotropic Breathwork, A New Approach to Self-Exploration and Therapy. And I thought, well, great, this book will give you a really clear idea of what the method is. It doesn't.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't want to let that out. They only let that out in specific seminars that people pay them to go to, that are organised by them. And they often go over days instead of just, ours was like a couple of hours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we'll talk more about our exploration, but this isn't brain surgery, right? I mean, it's breathing, and it should be free in theory if you have the and I guess that's what they're trying to protect. They're trying to protect people just doing it.
I think part of it is that they want people to be safe. They don't
Okay,
want people
fair
to go
enough.
home and do it and then hyperventilate. Although hyperventilation is not very risky,
Yeah.
really, because generally people will. I mean, obviously there are some potential bad effects, but considering the things that you can do, it's not that
Right.
risky. But the other thing I think is that the setting is really important for this experience. And I think maybe if you went home and just did it with yourself and your laptop and a YouTube video, I don't think it would work the same. I think
Yeah.
having other people in the room, having the music turned up really loud, all that stuff, just makes the experience much more dramatic.
Right, because some of this is your mind. You have to kind of use your imagination maybe a little bit. Maybe that
I'd
plays
say a
into
lot,
it.
yeah.
Right. Fair enough. So he played around, found out that this was giving him these trippy experiences, and has basically been spreading it since then.
Ever since, yeah, he's still going. And they also run, or at least his wife set up, something called the Spiritual Emergency. It's called Spiritual Emergence Crisis Network or something. SEN. It used to be called the Spiritual Emergency Network, and now it's Spiritual Emergence Network, which is to help people who have done things like holotropic breathwork and are having a bit of a like whack attack.
Oh, geez. Wow.
An existential whack attack. And they forward them on to therapists who will offer spiritual counsel and so forth. So it's part of a whole worldview. Like the one thing that we did, and the holotropic breathwork is like one small part of a much bigger project that the two of them are involved in.
See. I mean, it's great that there are support networks for people after these kind of experiences, I guess. It's something that I've become more interested in is, if somebody has whatever it is, an altered consciousness kind of state, what's the aftercare? And it's great that they at least have a network for that. But it also makes me think this is actually, this stuff works.
Well, it's certainly doing something. Yeah. Effects are being had.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can describe it as works, because they're never really quite clear about what to say something works. You need to know what the goal is, right? And whether it reaches that goal. But the whole point of holotropic breathwork is to take people into a non-ordinary state of consciousness and then let them work it out for themselves. Be there to
Okay.
support them, but let them work through the trauma or whatever they need to work through We're going to talk about some of the different things that we might have worked through in our sessions. But yeah, the idea is to let them work through it themselves. So there's no set goal. And if someone comes out and doesn't feel like it's worked out, well, it's kind of their fault, because they were there doing all they offer is the opportunity to get into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, and then from then on you do all the work.
So the facilitator doesn't get involved, they don't kind of give you therapy, they're quite hands off, or?
Generally, yeah, they have different approaches to how to deal with people, but it's supposed to be entirely client led. Like the breather is supposed to lead the session, and they're supposed to have some kind of like deep instinctual knowledge of what they need. So you're supposed to take, as a facilitator, you're supposed to take your cues from the breathers instead of imposing something on them from the outside. But a typical holotropic breathwork session would start with a sort of lecture about non-ordinary states of consciousness, what they are. Make sure everyone knows that they're real, and they'll brook no contradictions on that topic, that they're real and that they mean something very important, because you have to get people into the sort of, I would describe this as priming. You prime them to have a certain experience. You tell them what they're going to experience, and then they have that experience. Then you get them all lying down, they do the breathwork session, and then afterwards they will draw mandalas usually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, exactly. To like work through what they've experienced and give them something to focus on whilst they think about, I saw my mother and I forgave her everything. That didn't happen to me. It's just an example. That will never happen to me. But yeah, so you could draw a picture of your mum and flowers and stuff in a circle like you would.
And so there's this idea that you're kind of, again, we'll talk about this, but they kind of bring you back into the room. And so maybe the mandala drawing is a bit of a kind of grounding process.
Yeah, I think that's how they describe it, as a grounding thing. And like you said before, integrative, like to bring the lessons that you've learned from your time back into your real life.
Sounds pleasant. So
let's find out if it was.
Exactly. Yeah, so not so long ago, we took a trip to a place in London. This company was called the Alchemy of Breath. And I just came across them online. Sounded like a pretty nice, simple session in the evening. So myself and Rebecca headed up to London for this.
Yeah, if I get a WhatsApp message from Kat saying, do you want to come do psychedelic breath work? I'm not going to say no, am I?
So it was held in a pretty nice part of East London. I think, Rebecca, you seem to like it a bit more than I did.
It was hipster.
Very hipster.
It suited my tastes.
And the building itself, I think they have like a big cafe space in it. It's called the Old Baths. So it was definitely the right setting. Massive, almost like a
warehouse or something, exposed wood floors, like big old feature details, massive high ceilings. It was beautiful, really nice building.
I'm sure Stanislav Grof would have approved.
Yes. Well, maybe not.
Maybe. So we walked in, and what did we see?
Well, we walked into the main thing, which we're just like, oh, what a lovely building. And then we walk into the room, which is like, it kind of reminded me a bit of a gym, like a school gym. And so we walk in there, and there's this woman just like straight up in our faces almost immediately hugging us, which is alarming.
It's alarming. If she wasn't so... She did seem very approachable. Like, it was a very welcoming thing, but you're right, I didn't really know what to do. I said, I'm Kat, as soon as she started hugging me, which again, not really the appropriate thing to do, probably.
It's weird. I don't know. I guess it's strange to ask someone if you can hug them. It makes the whole thing weird. But also, I wasn't uncomfortable, but I wasn't super comfortable just getting this hug from this random stranger. So I was like, I guess if you're in that community and these are your people, you just instantly feel relaxed as soon as you walk into a room like that. And you're just like, well, here I am with my people and I can relax and hug them all. But I wasn't really there yet.
Definitely not. And my discomfort levels only raised when we went to the toilets, returned back, and there was music playing, which was fine. I liked the music.
Loud music.
Oh yeah, the loud music, as recommended. And people were dancing, like properly dancing. They weren't just kind of moving like, oh yeah, this is nice, let's have a chat. They were like, I think, raving. That's what I would describe.
They were raving. That's what you think a rave is.
Maybe it was a tame rave, a tame daytime rave.
Actually, I could go for a daytime rave. That's been my main problem with raves. They always tend to happen after bedtime.
So what did you think of the dancing?
Oh, it was
segments?
weird. It was also weird that the man whose name I can't remember, the leader, the person leading the
Anthony, yes.
Anthony, yeah. So he was leading the session and he was shouting encouragement on how we should dance. For example, free yourself, relax, dance with a stranger, and so on.
I was just satisfied to see how stereotypical he looked. It's like, just imagine you're like slightly elderly Western male guru. That is him.
Like
Perfect.
long silvery hair, a bit of a beard,
Waistcoat.
Yeah, what is it with waistcoats? They love them. They do look good.
It's only gurus who tend to wear them.
Yeah.
Very strange. But yeah, and how many? There were a lot of people in the room.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe like 60.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And it was a big room, but there were a lot of people, so it was tight. And because we'd arrived literally exactly on time, everyone else had already put down their yoga mat and sort of found a space, and they had to scrabble to find us mats to put down and then space. I had this moment of fear where I was like, oh, they're not going to be able to put us next to each other.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be all on my own out on the far western side of the hall, just surrounded by mad hippies. But thankfully, they put us on mats next to each other. So
And very close to the door,
Yes.
should we need to do a
also
run.
nice.
So I was very close, but I think after about 3 tracks, we finally got permission to stop pretending to dance, and we were allowed to take our seats on the mats.
Yeah, and then they sort of talked us through. Well, they didn't talk us through that much, did they?
No.
They didn't give us a lot of instruction at all.
I mean, if I'm trying to remember exactly what they said to us, but it was just a kind of like almost less detail than even what you've already spoken about. There was a little bit of chat about Grof and comparing it to other, I guess, things like ayahuasca, which seemed not everyone would put this kind of stuff in the same category. But I guess it's this idea that people there were looking for this non-ordinary state of consciousness, which is...
I think they mentioned, they said that sometimes this is called hollow birthing. Sometimes we call it hollow birthing because a lot of people have experiences of giving birth,
right,
or being born, or giving birth to their children again, or giving birth to future children.
Without giving birth to themselves. That's probably one as well.
Maybe. I can't remember that being listed,
things.
but in the book there are accounts of people giving birth to themselves. That seems to be quite a common experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got something to... Anyway. So... yeah, without any actual instructions other than you're breathing deeply with your mouth open. They weren't as specific as compared to what you were saying about breathing out deeply.
No, they weren't at all.
But one thing I do remember them saying was try to eliminate that gap, that pause between in and out breaths, which I try to remember to do. But it's not easy. It's definitely not natural.
Yeah, you have to keep reminding yourself to do it. And that's something that I found really difficult throughout. I kept on finding myself getting out of the rhythm. They said a lot about once you're in the rhythm, it's almost like, I remember him saying it because it was a lovely phrase. It's like the world's breathing you. And I was like, that sounds good. But that never happened for me. It was an effort.
I feel like I've heard that phrase before. Yeah, somebody might say, it feels like I was breathed. And I just thought it was bullshit. Like I can't believe that could be a thing, but I can imagine it with this.
If anything, it feels like I'm being breathed now when I'm breathing normally because I'm not having to think about it.
Yeah.
It's just happening. Yeah. But there, I was thinking about it a lot.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to do it right. But maybe that's just like the perfectionist. Like I've got to have the maximum experience.
And also let's get the wording right of these things. So they turn music on?
Yeah.
At this point? And it was, I guess I would describe, it wasn't what I expected. I actually thought it would be maybe like quite mantra based, maybe Eastern stuff like that. But it was actually just like a lot of quite nice tracks. I mean, I think I heard Coldplay at one point.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't recognise Coldplay if I heard it, unfortunately. But it was lots of kind of it certainly wasn't all like world music.
No,
that's it. There was some kind of trancey stuff, and one of the things about halfway through, maybe towards the end, there was a song where the lyrics were just forgive. Stanislav Grof would have frowned upon that. Why? Specifically in his book, he talks about how important it is to make sure the music, actually I think it's his wife who's behind the music selections, that the music doesn't have any lyrical content that the breathers could recognize, because you don't want to accidentally direct their experiences.
Okay. Well, in that case, they definitely shouldn't have played Coldplay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be music that's unfamiliar to the breathers and that won't influence them in any particular way. Like you can give them a general sort of feeling of like upbeat happiness or seriousness or intenseness, but you can't like try and direct their experience through creating like a curated playlist.
Yeah, so maybe world music would have been better in this case. But anyway, I was enjoying it fairly well.
Yeah, it was great.
And other than that, like, I mean, I don't know about you, but it was pretty quickly, I'd say within about 10 to 15 minutes, where I definitely started feeling tingly sensations in my hands, which was fine. I was like, yes, something's working right now. And then my face and head. That's about as far as let's say that I let it go, but also just maybe as far as it went for me. It gets to a point where for me the pressure, it feels like there was a lot of pressure in my head as like something to do with like the blood, or I don't know, but I certainly didn't see anything or even feel any kind of like disconnection or out of it. There was none of that you might have in other like drugs, right? So it really was just, okay, I can totally see how my hands are getting maybe a bit tingly, and after my face started going, I didn't really let it get any further. At one point, one of the facilitators did come and like help me breathe deeper.
That was quite early on. I was quite alarmed because suddenly there was this woman bending over you, and I was like, oh, I just sort of sensed her there, and I looked up and there she was.
Yes, and I think that was really helpful because she did guide me enough that I think if I'd been doing what I was doing before, I probably wouldn't have gotten to the right state. So that was good.
What did she say to you?
I think she was just like, she put maybe her hand on my belly and was like, really breathe deeper. I think that was the main thing. I think I take very shallow breaths anyway. And no, it was good guidance. But again, I still was kind of always doubting, am I doing it right?
Yeah, I had exactly the same problem. Oh, something we should probably say is that because the room was so, there were so many people, it was so packed, we were very close to each other.
Yeah, you could reach out and touch the person next
and the
to you.
person who was on my other side, the other side to Kat, she was thrashing around a bit, and several times her hands made contact with my arms, which was alarming.
So tell us a bit more about your experience.
Oh yeah, I had quite a different experience. I had the tingles and in my hands and feet and coming across my head, that's a symptom of respiratory alkalosis. That's a common syndrome. That's what happens when your blood pH goes up. It's one of the symptoms. So that's very explicable. But it wasn't unpleasant. It was just kind of like, I guess like you say, it's nice to know that something's working.
Exactly.
And then or maybe at the same time, my hands and feet started to sort of clench up, and they warned us that this might happen.
They called it like the kangaroo effect,
yeah, the kangaroo,
maybe?
That's right, or the claw.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how else to describe it apart from to say it's just like they become all scrunched up.
Did it make you want to? Why wouldn't you just turn your hands into fists, or was that not?
No,
what you would
that
want
never
to do?
occurred to me to do it. I think because that would also be tense. Like if you think about your hands at their relaxed state,
they are
slightly bent.
Yeah.
Like you don't relax with your hands splayed,
No.
and you also don't relax with them in fists. So maybe that's something, I don't know. It was odd, but then I felt like my whole body was doing that, and I was kind of going into like a fetal, like my whole body was like a claw, and then I start like imagining stuff. This is not a vision because it's about me, but it's very, very clear and feels quite intense. I'm thinking of. There's this thing that happened back in the Neolithic or whatever, where occasionally people in Europe would fall into a bog, and because they hit the minerals in the mud at the right time, their bodies would be preserved. We call them bog bodies. So I was thinking of a particularly famous one called the Totten Man. I think he's in the British Museum. Let's be honest, I know he's in the British Museum. I've visited him many times. This is why he popped into my mind.
No, well.
He's an interesting character because they think maybe he was killed as part of a ritual sacrifice. Yeah. So anyway, he's all up on his side in a fetal position, and because he's been in a bog, he's gone all black. So his skin, he looks like a mummy. He's naturally mummified, basically. So imagine like an emaciated, completely black-skinned skeleton. Quite alarming thing, but I think of him fondly. So for some reason that popped into my head, and because I was all clawed up and lying on my side, I felt like I was becoming him.
Wow.
It was really odd.
But was it, this is what I'm trying to get at, was it kind of like, this is my imagination and, oh, isn't that a funny idea? kind of like if you're falling asleep and you might just be thinking of random stuff. Is that what it felt like? Or was it, again, almost like you were being breathed? Were you having this happen to you?
It was kind of actually on the border of sleep and wakefulness is a good analogy, because it didn't feel like I was making it up, but it definitely felt like it was generated from my mind.
Okay.
You like it
Yeah,
when
yeah,
something
yeah.
just between a dream and just a daydream, like somewhere in that area. But it was very vivid.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I may as well go with it.
Yeah.
And then I was still experiencing the tingles, and they now spread to my whole body. So I'm lying there, the bog man under the ground, all tingling, and I start thinking these tingles could be like maggots or something, because I'm underground and I'm a corpse. So, and then I was like, no, that's a bad thought. Don't think that. And then I thought, oh, you know what they could be actually? The tingles could be like grass.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it could be grass growing up
Yep.
from my body under the ground. So I went with that, and I just imagining that. I was lying there quite happily, imagining I was the bog. So it's interesting that I had this presence of mind to say, no, I don't want to think about maggots.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
You can pull yourself back. And that makes me wonder about other people's experiences and whether, I mean, you have a choice. Like, it's not like you just go straight into this thing. And I think this is the case for many drug experiences, maybe not all, but at some point you have a choice. And I think your mind can say, yes, let's turn it into this, or let's just go to the darkest places it can. I think you have some control over it.
I think you definitely do, but you might not know you have control. If you think, for example, if you thought that these messages were coming from the divine or from a deep part of you that had wisdom to teach you, then you might feel, well, I don't like the thought of maggots, but I have to go with it, because why else would it be given to me? And you could go into somewhere that would be quite unpleasant.
Sure. Yeah, I can imagine that.
But I wasn't having any of that.
Yeah.
And then I started to have what was kind of like a vision, in that I was seeing black because my eyes were closed, and that's generally what I see. But then there was a point of like blacker black,
Okay.
like a circle of blacker black in the black, and I started to feel as if I was rushing towards it, like it was getting bigger, but it wasn't actually getting bigger. It's a very strange, because if you're moving towards something, you'd expect it to get bigger, but it wasn't getting bigger. Yeah. Well, exactly. That's what I thought. Well, I didn't think that at the time. I thought that afterwards. At the time, I was trying to figure out what it could be. And I thought, because I'm under the ground and I'm the bog man, I must be looking up into the inside of a tree.
Oh, that's
And I must be
nice.
rushing up through the middle of a giant tree.
That's very imaginative, because that sensation of rushing, I've heard people recount that from taking something like ayahuasca. So that thing of, like, a lot of people talk about shooting off into the stars or something. So it's funny, this idea of like almost motion.
Yeah, it's very strange. And I thought afterwards there was and at the same time the music is getting loud and crazy, and there's people thrashing around and screaming all around us, and there's one man who I think I just assume that he's screaming because he's giving birth, because he's like like the sort of noises that I imagine one would make if you were giving birth.
I just assumed they were all being dicks. Like, I honestly thought everyone there who was making loud sounds, shouting, yelling, they were there to annoy me.
But isn't that what you just generally think whenever anyone makes a loud sound?
This definitely wasn't me tripping. It was just me being quite annoyed about how loud everyone was. Yeah. I mean, not everyone, but I would say there were maybe like 7 people who were particularly vocal.
Yeah, there was a woman in the sharing circle afterwards. A woman, she was a shaman, and she was explaining to me how hard it was to do a quiet, gentle healing on a quiet, gentle soul when the shaman next door is making a real racket with drums and stuff.
Right.
So it's probably a similar experience.
Yeah. Anyway, that was quite off-putting. But I'm glad they were having a trip of a lifetime.
And then that was about it. That's all I saw. And then eventually, they said it would go really fast. It didn't go particularly fast.
No.
I felt like it was an hour. It was an hour.
It was definitely an hour.
And then eventually, at the end, they played a song I recognised. Oh,
that was a nice song.
That almost like because I don't know. There's something like, when you hear something familiar that makes you feel good. And I love this Xavier Rudd song, and I've seen him in concert. I'm a genuine fan.
Yeah.
And I heard that music, and I was just like, oh, life is good. I'm allowed to move. I can breathe like a normal person again. And they just encouraged us to do whatever we wanted to kind of come out of it. But I was doing a bit of yoga stretching to get my hands and feet back, because they were still
I didn't tell you
clawed.
this. I really wanted to do a downward no, I wanted to go into child's pose because I saw you doing it. I was like, but then she'll think I'm copying her. So I'm just going to chill.
Oh, no.
But it looked very comfy.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was really good.
What was also nice was looking around at everyone else kind of waking up. It almost had this kind of, the morning of a festival. When you go outside your tent and everyone's kind of like, oh, look at what we've all been through together and here we are. And that was a nice moment.
It was, yeah. And I had this weird, I don't know how to describe it. There's just this weird sort of goodwill feeling to all the people in the room, which is weird for me. Maybe some people just walk around their whole lives feeling goodwill to everyone.
No, it was definitely felt like that to me, and it did feel unusually so. Even after, I mean, we keep talking about yoga, but like if you went to a yoga class, you might feel a bit like that at the end. But this was a very good feels of loving my fellow humans, even if they've been annoying me for the last hour. So,
and then when we sat down in the sharing circle, I was looking at all of them, and I was like, oh, you're all such beautiful people. And I just kept looking at each one of them in turn going, look, she's beautiful, he's beautiful. And I did this for like, I don't know, the first couple of minutes of sharing, and then it started to wear off, and I was like, she's beautiful, he's all right, she's beautiful, she's and then they were just normal people again. I was like, oh, well, that's my...
Back to reality, so sharing time, and there are maybe about like 4 or 5 people shared a bit.
I thought a few more. Okay, maybe it's more like 6 or 7. I don't know.
Like erased some, but it was again a lot of stereotypical stories, right?
One of the ones that I thought was really interesting, and one of the first people who spoke talked about how she met her mother, who is now dead, in the earth world, physical world, and forgave her. And I was like, well, of course you did. They were playing a song and the lyrics were forgive, forgive, forgive. This is exactly what Stanislav Grof warned us about, isn't it?
That's true. I'm trying to remember some of the other trips that the people had, but people definitely seem to have not out of body experiences, but experiences.
Yeah, almost like dreams.
Yes.
They'd had, and this same woman, she then went, so she met her earth mother, who is now dead, and forgave her, so that was nice. And then she went to meet her spirit mother, and her spirit mother taught her some sacred words that could heal her emotionally and physically in this physical realm.
Okay.
She didn't tell us what those words were.
Yeah.
Maybe they only work for her, I don't know.
It might have been light language. Have you heard of that?
No.
We'll keep talking about that another day, but I think it's made up.
It's a whole other episode.
Let's just say it's made up. But one thing I do know is that people had these kind of insights which are genuinely helpful. So like these nice feelings of whether it's something like, oh, I'm not so crazy, or like I'm not the only one thinking like this. So it's that kind of feelings that I'm not alone, or I'm not different or wrong. And that, again, is something that I've experienced in other kinds of group sharing situations. And it is really nice to hear people come to those realizations, because you realize, oh, that's really true, and I needed to hear that as well.
Yeah. There was one guy who said he felt like he spent too much time jumping into other people's heads and trying to preempt what they were thinking, and he should probably just relax and not worry about other people so much. And that was really nice. Oh, and the delightful thing we had to do, spirit fingers. We had to wiggle our fingertips instead of clapping, because clapping can be quite jarring. Yeah. And actually, although I felt ridiculous doing it, they do have a point. It is quite jarring when someone's just said something really emotional, and for us all to just start clapping.
Clapping would be weird, but also it's sad just to have silence and not to do the fingers. So we're kind of like holding our hands up, and I guess it is like jazz hands, but with like wiggling fingers. It was a sweet thing to do, and I would definitely do that in other group sessions, but I guess everyone has to know what you're doing first.
No, I think it's better if you're just like out for drinks with your friends and you start doing it.
It's something to try. And then we did a series of, I guess they were grounding exercises. So one of them was listening to a song which had one word, Ma. And singing it for like all of eternity.
Oh, it went on for such a long time. And we had to have our right hand on our heart and our left hand on the person to our left's back.
Which is nice for like 2 minutes.
It is. But this song went on for what felt like hours. It's really probably about 3 or 4 minutes, right?
Without a doubt. That was very
But you could feel the vibrations of your own of your own chest, and
Yeah.
you could feel the vibrations in their back, and it did kind of it felt nice. It was kind of similar to the other thing they did. I think they did too many things.
Yeah,
they could have had one simple thing we did, but one of the other things we did is we all massaged each other in a circle.
Yes, which was, again, I think there was that feeling of, oh, this is going to be a bit uncomfortable, but actually it was just a bit fun.
It's a strange sensation to be needing someone else. We're just got our hands on the person's next to a shoulder and someone else's hands on our shoulders, so it's hard to know what to focus on. Like, I find that difficult. I'm easier giving or receiving, but doing both at the same time.
Yeah. I kind of liked it because it was almost like the feedback that I was getting and giving at the same time. It is very strange sensation, but you almost have that kind of guidance. Like, okay, I'm feeling this here and that feels good, so I can do that to this person.
Yeah.
That was just a nice idea. One of the other things we did was at the end, because there were people from different countries, we had to say I am love in our own language. And I don't know if you like this as much as I did, but I just really liked it. Everyone was saying, and this is about, like we said, 60 people saying I am love, and you get the French one, and it's like, oh, that sounds so lovely.
There's something so cringy about being forced to say. I can't even say it. Like, that's
oh, funny. Well, I don't really believe it because I don't even know what it means. Like, what does it
Exactly.
even mean? But saying anything, like, it feels like a Honda ad. Like, you could be saying, I love coffee. You could be saying anything.
I would
and
happily
there's
say I love
something-
coffee.
Right. There's something nice about having everyone do it. But each to their own. And I do think I applaud Anthony and Amy for, like you said, there were almost too many exercises at the end. But the effort they put into doing that was good. So by the time I left, I was like, oh yeah, it was ages ago since I was breathing, and potentially for some people really off their face.
Yeah, I think if you just let people hop up off their mats and go out into the streets of London, that would be a bad. I was in a Kundalini yoga class once, because I do these sort of things, and this woman got up and walked off at the end of the class in kind of a hurry and walked straight into a plate glass wall.
Oh,
yeah.
But it's like the number one rule in yoga. It's like, don't skip savasana. Like, that's like wrong.
She was off to some busy business lady meeting.
Yeah, lesson learned. So how did you have a good experience? It sounds like you had.
I did. I was really interested in this tunnel experience and what it meant, and especially because I'd heard I'd heard references to this experience. Like, you hear about it when people see the light. I actually didn't have a light, but I had the sensation of moving through a tunnel. So I was like, what is this? Like, what does it mean? And I think you're right. I think that because they mentioned hollow birthing at the beginning, if I had been that way inclined, I probably might have experienced it as, although it doesn't really make any sense, because if you think about it, when you're a baby being born, your eyes wouldn't be pointing towards the opening of your mother's vagina.
No,
you come out crown first, right?
Also, it's pretty squished. Like, it's not like there's a lot of room to be.
So
looking
it would
at
be
anything.
black. Yeah, and your eyes would probably be closed.
Of course. If anything, you might start hearing stuff. So I think one of the things that I've heard shamans doing is making a kind of whoosh sound, which is meant to like reproduce that feeling of being birthed. I don't see how it really could, but it's a nice theory, and it's a little bit more logical than the sight.
Well, the Grofs are fascinated with this idea of particularly remembering your birth memories, and remembering previous memories to that as well. So previous lives and things, they're very into that, and that's one of the common experiences people have apparently when doing holotropic breath work, is remembering things from before they were born. Which obviously I don't think we're going to debate the idea that you can't believe things from before you were born.
Can I just say, what if let's this is not even my theory, but say if we had another kind of memory, which is almost like on a genetic basis, could our genes in some way be encoded with a memory of past lives? I mean, the fact that we reproduce in this reliable way and our bodies kind of know what to do, could that be that they know other things too?
It is kind of miraculous the way our bodies just sort of seem to know how to develop and grow, and like genes are cool. But the thing is, if you had memories encoded in your genes, they'd still have to find some way to communicate with your brain. So either way, it's going to be a brain thing at the end of the day. And we know that children can't form memories that young and retain them. So even if there were like some secret special genetic memories, which we have no evidence for, so it's just like a crazy theory, but I'll go with you on it. even if such a thing existed, how they would get into our minds for us to actually process them and understand them. I
Yeah.
don't see how that would work.
Well, I'm kind of imagining if it was like an elaborate metaphor, I would say that our ancestors, every time, you know, they were like making their memories, it all kind of gets banked. Ah, but then yeah, how would it get passed on?
Yeah, and where would it
I
be
mean,
banked?
would they be in like the ether? I mean, I'm sure people have answers for this stuff because I
Yes.
think it's like a theory that a lot of people hold,
Yeah.
right? I just can't see it. I would need somebody to explain how that would work to me. It doesn't seem that intuitive.
I got really interested in the idea of remembering your birth. It's weird because this is like, I never heard of this before, I don't think. Although there are some famous people who claim to remember, I think maybe Aldous Huxley claimed to remember his birth. But anyway, I hadn't heard anyone talk about this. No one I know can remember their birth.
I mean, I don't believe anyone who says they can remember something from before they were 3.
Yeah,
Because I remember
exactly.
being told you can't
Yeah.
form memories before then.
Yeah, so I did a little bit of research on what they call childhood amnesia, and it's basically between 2 to 4 is generally when people start having memories, and there's lots of different theories about how it works. It's about your brain development. Your brain
Right.
isn't developed enough to set memories like that. It's about not having language yet.
Right.
So you can't store them in the language centers of your brain, which tend to, and also about not having context. So these things are just sort of random happenings.
Yeah, so-
You can't put them into a narrative.
Yeah, there would be no reason to remember things. But I have, like, for example, the one that always strikes me as a bit strange is my dad will talk about seeing his grandfather dead laid out in the coffin on their like kitchen table, and he was maybe 2.5. So that could work because
Yeah.
again, he was a pretty intelligent child, but it was traumatic. So
Yeah.
I think it's traumatic events. I think kids might remember in the kind of earlier stages.
Yeah, when looking into it, that is quite a common theory that there's something about trauma or dramatic or emotional events that makes them stick
Yeah.
more than other events.
But
the
birth-
idea of remembering your birth is scientifically implausible.
yeah.
And the only way that we can imagine it happening would be if we're to speculate some kind of spiritual or genetic memory, which is exactly what the Grofs would do.
Right.
But as I said, we have no evidence for that. It seems much more likely that the tunnel experience is actually a common brain effect that happens in human brains.
Okay.
So I started going down that tunnel
Yeah.
of research.
Ba-dum-dum.
And I found this amazing paper by Sue Blackmore, which was talking about the tunnel experience specifically in OBEs and NDEs. I think I'll put the link in the show notes. And she was talking about the 4 form constants. So these are 4 common shapes that people have when they're tripping, when they're OBEs, NDEs, all these sort of things, and when they're experiencing apoxia, when your brain is deficit in CO2 or oxygen or both.
Okay.
These are common things that come up. They're lattices, cobwebs, tunnels, and spirals.
Oh, how funny. And how many times have we heard those in like trip stories?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So the reason why these things keep coming up is because they are to do with the way our eyes interface with our cerebral cortex. The paper's actually really good. It goes through a couple of potential explanations and shows why they couldn't be true. The first one is the idea that these are real things out in the world, and it talks about why that's unlikely. But then it talks about the idea that they could be visual effects. The reason they don't think they're solely visual effects is because they don't move when your eyes move. So if you have like if you have something on the surface of your eye,
Floaters.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, then it will move when your eyes move.
Yeah.
You can make these sort of visual effects by applying pressure to your eyes. I used to do this all the time. I used to just push down on my eyes
Yeah, I used to do
when I was a
that. You'd
kid.
see
Yeah.
some shit, yeah.
I'd see some shit. I used to see what I thought of as pineapple rings.
Okay.
These bright yellow, you have to push quite hard. I wouldn't recommend doing
Don't
it. These bright yellow rings that look like, tinned pineapple.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite foods when I was a kid. So I just see this ring and it looked just like a pineapple ring. But you have to get that effect, you have to press down on both eyes.
Oh,
It's something about applying binocular pressure
wow.
because you're putting pressure on your cerebral cortex,
That's
on the visual
nuts.
cortex. Sorry, it's the visual cortex. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the idea. It's about the way that the images that are coming into your eyes get to your visual cortex.
It's a very cool thing, I think, just to think about for me for some reason, because I feel like when we are seeing things, we forget that there's the connect between what we're seeing, which we see as like, oh, it's the world, it's like reality, and then what's happening in our brain
Yeah.
to kind of register that. It's kind of mind blowing. It really
Yeah, we're literally seeing how our brains and our eyes work.
Yeah.
That's what I was experiencing when I was lying there seeing the tunnel. I was
Yeah.
seeing the process of how my eyes work and how they interface with my
Cool.
visual cortex. That is amazing. And what's happening is when the light comes into your eyes or any data comes into your eyes, it comes into your retina, and your retina understands it as concentric circles.
Yeah.
And then it's translated to your visual context as parallel lines. And somewhere with those two, in that translation, when you're in a non-ordinary state of consciousness, which means you have hyperactivity in your brain's just going mental, firing off all sorts of business up in there, and in that process the circles and the lines come together, make a tunnel, and because of the hyperactivity it feels like you're moving through. And this is exactly why this common effect pops up again and again, and they have similarly detailed explanations for the other form constants. And
Talk about ruining everyone's trip.
no, I think it's amazing though. It's so cool.
I like the fact that you're still seeing something that's really impressive.
Yeah.
But the impressive thing is what's us.
Yeah.
Like what we're seeing is our inner workings. You don't have to visit another world. It's actually our world, and that's pretty cool.
And what it became, because I was getting really into this, I started looking at depictions in art of the tunnel, of which there have been many. I'll put some in show notes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to look back at artists creating work from, hundreds of years ago, drawing the same thing that I saw.
How funny.
Because they have the same eyes and they have the same brain. They have human brains. This is a human experience. It, in a way, it made me feel something that might be called spiritual. In researching this, in reading the papers and the science around it, that was actually quite a moving experience for me.
Because you're feeling this connection, and that goes beyond just, oh, I had this experience by taking this thing or doing this thing. It's like, no, this is an experience that I'm sharing with these people, and it just comes from within.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So yeah, the other sort of things I started looking into were a bit not quite as exciting and didn't make me feel quite so spiritual. Looking into hyperventilation syndrome. And
Ooh, these are the dangers, right?
Well, yes and no. Hyperventilation syndrome isn't that serious. It's something that people have when they have panic attacks.
Okay.
I mean, it's not nice, certainly, but you return to normal quite soon afterwards. But the symptoms are really interesting. So the symptoms we talked before about the tingling and the tetany, which they call the kangaroo paw or the claw, which is what I experienced. But the emotional symptoms listed on the NHS website are confusion, agitation, a feeling of being outside yourself, and, in quotes, seeing things that aren't there.
Wow.
And yes, so as I said, also tingling in the extremities, dizziness, muscle twitching. Yeah. These are all the experiences that happen when you're doing holotropic breath work.
And I wonder people who are having a not good time because of these things. So what were the negative things again?
Well, we've got confusion, agitation.
So
I guess a
those two
feeling of being
things.
outside yourself could be bad as well. That could be quite disorienting.
Yeah. And I can imagine confusion and disorientation, all of that. And agitation being unpleasant, but people are kind of saying, oh, this is like a spiritual thing that's happening to me. Yeah. But and can that be actually a good way of dealing with it for people, right? So if you're going through something that's not pleasant, to actually say, well, this is what I have to do to heal, or telling a story around this negative physical symptom. I mean, if every time I got sick or got a cold I was like, well, it's what spirit like I need to do, it's my journey, I'd actually probably feel a lot better about it.
Yeah, but not so much as you go out and make yourself sick. Because if you're entering into the experience and getting the negative things and then interpreting them positively and then going, that was great, let's go and do let's go and get sick again.
Right. So on that, dangers.
Well, this came up. I was thinking about the choice I made to not experience the maggots and how I have that choice because I am kind of taking this all with a pinch of salt and thinking this is going to be an interesting experience to have with my friend and we can chat about it afterwards. And, I'm pretty sure that no goblins are going to come out and drag me down into the yoga mat or anything, just for an example. But yeah, so, and I chose not to go that way because I thought it was an unpleasant way to go. But then I thought about the person who really thinks it's for real, like I was saying earlier, and thinks they're getting an important message, and how they might have responded in my situation. They might have said, well, I have to feel the maggots, and then the maggots might have eaten through them. They might have had a terrible time, like a really unpleasant psychological time.
Yes. It's something that I'm wary of because I don't know how far I could push myself, before I see something that I don't like and it becomes like a bad dream that I can't forget, and it it actually affects me negatively afterwards, and that is something that I can like realistically be scared of.
So even though you're more open to it, I think you would still, if you felt something bad come up, you'd probably push it away.
Oh god, yeah, like definitely. I mean, I've had bad dreams, and that hovers at least for the next day. You don't want to see these things.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how much of it, because I still think there is a part of me that says, how real does it need to feel for me to think something else is going on that is outside of me? And because I guess I am the seeker, I am open to that happening.
Yeah.
And if it's a bad thing, then I will run away. But I think there are a lot of people who they are even more open to it happening, and they believe that they might have had a good experience the first time, and the next time they do have a bad experience, but because, like you're saying, they follow it and they don't run away because they believe it to be very real, and it's almost like part of their journey. Where does that lead? If what you see is too disturbing?
I think if you take it seriously, then you have to take the good with the bad.
Exactly.
You can't just shrug off and say, well, I don't like that bad vision.
Yeah,
I won't believe that. If you believe your visions, you have to believe all of them.
Right.
And that means that you might end up having really nasty things. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, you can kind of like, you can have the experience, and then if it's bad, you can run away.
Yeah. Like,
but then that's not very respectful to the to the higher power that's sending you these visions. If you want to think of it that way, you can't. Yeah, I don't think you can pick and choose, which leaves you in a really strange position if something nasty comes up.
For sure. One horror story I read, which was not so much to do with this kind of holotropic breath work, but it was a similar technique called rebirthing, which I believe often only lasts for about 15 minutes. It's quite a quick breath work practice.
Oh, that sounds like the one for me.
But yeah, but it's also meant to have similar effects. And there was a case in Colorado where a girl died.
Wow.
Because they were trying to kind of create this birthing experience, and they had her kind of like wrapped up very tightly in different fabrics and stuff, and also the two men there applied their body weight, so that's about 300 pounds, and crushed her.
That's horrible.
And so they had to ban rebirthing in Colorado, at least. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah, the rebirthing thing is definitely related to the holotropic breathing, because the Grofs are massive fans of rebirthing, and they think that there's a big trauma that happens to most people when they're born. That coming out of the womb where you're all safe and you're linked with the divine oneness of everything, and then coming out into the real world, that's a traumatic thing. And they think it's really valuable to go through it again. And like, it's the idea of like catharsis. Like if you re-experience it in a safe place, then, and catharsis is a problematic concept in itself.
We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic to get into. But yeah, that's. I can imagine that's being something that they'd be involved with.
Wow. I mean, again, I have to like respect what he's saying to an extent because of all like the Freudian stuff. I mean, some of this has legs. It's just, how far do you take that? And obviously there are examples of that, like I said, just definitely not helping people.
In the book, they mention that, oh, actually, no, I didn't get this from the book. I got this from some other research I was doing, and it was, I couldn't track this down to verify it, so take it for what it is, but I think it sounds quite plausible. Apparently they're not, in the UK, they're not allowed to practice holotropic breathwork as a medical intervention anymore. Now it has to be like as a self-help workshop or as a spiritual thing, because at some point in the past they were suggesting, and in the book they do suggest that it can be good for some ailments. I can't remember exactly what the ailments were. One of them, they were all things to do with inflammatory sort of things. So arthritis, cystitis, yes. Bronchitis, inflamed lungs, sinusitis, all these things, that's what they have in common, inflamed things or blocked things. So Raynaud's disease, which is when you like can't get blood to the ends of your fingers. So inflammation and blocked things. And they claim that it's about you're bioenergetically blocked. And
so like with circulation, I can kind of see the connection. I mean, the fact that your hands and face tingle and feel warm, I can kind of imagine that it's
And something is happening to your blood pH level. So maybe there's something being forced up or down or around. Is plausible.
Yeah. But until I see some, and obviously there isn't enough scientific evidence to suggest that.
I was wondering, I thought about bringing my husband to this session we went to, and I thought, no, he can't possibly do it. He has asthma. But that's one of the things that they say it's very good for.
Wow.
Yeah, although they do make a point of saying, you should make sure that the breather has their inhaler handy in case it gets too bad. They say a lot of asthma is psychogenic, which I guess they mean is like psychosomatic.
Yeah.
And if you can just go through, re-experience the traumas related that caused your psychogenic asthma, you'll be much better. So getting people in with asthma and getting them to do those sort of breathing exercises seems really bad idea. And that's something I wanted to ask you. Was there like a form you had to fill out about health conditions before we went into this?
Nothing. And even crazier, and this is just more of a logistical thing, when we walked in, no one even checked like who we were or whether we'd booked on. I was like, we paid money for this. And like, it's almost like when somebody doesn't check your train ticket, you kind of want someone to check.
Yeah, I went to the hassle of buying this.
Yeah, so words to the wise, if you want to go for free, you can just walk in.
Well, maybe that's why I was so busy.
Yeah. But one thing I'm wondering is it bad for any, like, do they warn against anything, like because I know that people with post-traumatic stress disorder, stuff like that.
Yeah, they basically say it's on a an individual basis. Okay. So, but they do a mental health intake sort of form that everyone has to fill out before they come anywhere near the breathing session, and they assess them, and they look for things like schizophrenia and anything that means that the person is sort of unstable in their mental health situation, and then they will go and talk to them individually and assess whether it's appropriate for them to do it, because I think they don't want to send people into sort of a psychotic state.
Okay,
but they have in the book they didn't mention this ever happening, and maybe they're being overcautious, because really it is just breathing on the floor. It's not really that big a deal, but yeah, they are very careful, unlike these cowboy breathing sessions that we go to.
And what's funnier is that this particular place, and I'm not like even trying to like speak out against them, but and they also hold online sessions, and that's where I worry, because I'm like, well, if you're not in the room with somebody, it just seems a little less safe.
Yeah.
But each their own. I mean, you have to kind of let people. You can't nanny people.
Yeah,
right?
I watched a YouTube video the other day about a guy teaching people to do black flips, and he was making a sort of a helmet for his head out of foam, and he said it was guaranteed to so you couldn't break your neck when you did black flips, and he just made it out of foam and duct tape, and he kept on saying, "This is guaranteed. This will be great," and I was just like, "What?" So this is brilliant. The world of the internet, right?
Yeah.
You just have to use your own common sense
and
to some degree.
Brilliant that we do have that level of freedom to express our bad advice. And on that note, what would you say if you were to like round up your experience? Would you say that there's something that you'd recommend to people?
I think if you're studying neurology and you're particularly interested in the brain and how it works, this would be a really cool thing to do. And you wouldn't have to do drugs, because obviously some people are leery of drugs, and understandably so. And this gives you the opportunity to see how your brain works in a really profound and interesting way, if you have the same experience I did, which is not necessarily guaranteed. But I think it's cool, and I would love to see this set up in a session where you had a lecture from a neurologist beforehand saying, okay, this is what's going to happen in your brain. Isn't this cool? And then afterwards, a sharing circle where we all talked about experiences, and we had an expert saying, oh, you know what was happening when this, and maybe this, and like to actually take it up. That would be fascinating and really, really cool.
I agree, and probably really helpful for like the medical students, psychology, clinical psychologists would probably be really into that.
I'm surprised there's not more of an overlap, to be honest, because you have this this thing where neuroscientists are looking at how the brain works and interested in how the brain works. And then you have these people who are doing these crazy things with their brain, whether it's drugs or breathing, but doing crazy things with their brain. And it seems like they should come together. I guess they are.
And the third, which is just your run-of-the-mill clinical psychologists. And like these people are I think they're getting closer, right? So I've got friends who are interested in using things like mushrooms and MDMA to treat clinical disorders, but it still seems like we're quite far off.
Yeah, it seems like this is a really interesting area of research.
Yeah.
And I don't think it should just be done by hippies. I think it should be done by people who are interested in finding, scientific explanations for this stuff because they're really cool and interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd do it again. Probably, I don't know. I did kind of have fun, but I felt rough the next day, really rough.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it could be because we stayed up really late because we went to London. We had like an hour train journey home afterwards, plus the tube. And as previously mentioned, I'm an early bedtime person. So, but I also think it was because my body was so tense for that
Yes.
hour, like lying there all clutched up like the bog man.
Yeah.
It made me kind of sore. So I don't know if I really want to go through that again. But it also gave me, and the other thing that I got out of it was in the sharing circle. It was an interesting moment where this woman said what she'd got from the evening's experience is some reassurance, because sometimes she thinks that she might be making this all up, and that she feels she's like training as a healer or something, and she's just getting into this world, and sometimes she doubts herself and feels like none of her friends are into it, and is she just being crazy? And the man, or it could have been the woman who was running the session, said, does anyone else feel doubt about these things? So I immediately stick my hand up. I feel doubt about everything. That's kind of what skeptics do. And a few other people do too. Actually, quite a lot of other people do.
Yeah.
And the woman said, it's normal to feel doubt.
Yeah.
And this is part of the experience. And then the man chipped in with, yes, and through experiences like this, you learn to trust your inner truth. And I was like, oh, such a shame that he came in, because I think following the doubt is really valuable. And that might end up taking you back to some woo-woo hippie nonsense.
Yeah.
But don't prescribe where the destination's going to be.
Sure.
If you're feeling doubt, follow that and see what happens.
And then it's kind of like innocent until proven guilty. Like, keep trying to prove these things.
Yeah.
Both wrong and right. So rather than just being so dismissive at the, like, oh, this breathwork thing sounds like what hippies do, so I'm going to dismiss that. But also question your own ideas about it too.
Yeah. What about you? Would you do it again?
I would do it again. Mostly, maybe not at that particular place and that particular setup. But for me, it's that idea of getting people together in some kind of just a group session, I think is just really valuable. And even though I didn't really have any extreme physical effects, or even I didn't see anything, just going through something with people, and, like you said, like the sharing circle, I think we both really enjoyed that. So doing more kind of almost ritualistic community things feels like something that I do enjoy, even if I am a bit like critical and a bit awkward in these situations. I think it's probably good for me to do more of them. So yeah, and again, like you said, I feel like there are ways that this could be done, or added to another kind of practice. You talk about Grof's technique, and they do the mandalas afterwards. I would like to see it maybe as part of like you could like have some yoga in there, like all sorts of things you could add. So I'm interested in it. It's
one of the things that Grof brings up a lot in his book, or the Grofs bring up in their book, the Grofs.
Sounds like a TV show.
It's great. What would it be like? I don't know, like Friday with the Grofs, Friday afternoon with the Grofs, tea and biscuits with the Grofs. Anyway, one of the things that they talk about in their book is the fact that therapy, in the way that he trained, he was a Freudian, is very mental. Like, it's very talky, no feely. Yeah, I guess is what he's saying. And that's obviously with the breath work, it's bringing in all this physical stuff. And it's interesting you mentioned yoga, because that's a similar thing, right? It's about experiencing your mind and your body together. And that, I don't think that's woo-woo at all. I think that's sensible.
And I actually would say we will be talking about this more as our show continues. But yeah, I would actually recommend that to people, because as somebody who's very much in their head, I guess is the expression, more of those things, even if they do seem, or if they're packaged up in a bit of a hippie woo-woo way, it probably does somebody good.
Yeah, I would hate to think that there were people who were like having that experience of being anxious and feeling tense and maybe having a backache or whatever, and not stretching, because that's something hippies do.
Yeah,
stretch.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
The other funny thing in the book was kind of along those lines, is a lot of what he was saying was the therapists, the psychotherapists, they just think we're crazy, but we know this is real. And I was like, this is a classic false dichotomy. Yeah. You're not crazy and it's not real. Yeah. You're human.
Yeah. And you can use these experiences, but you don't have to believe X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, there's just a lot of black and white thinking, which is a bit strange. What an experience. I'm glad you invited me to it. I hope to do more stuff like this.
Me too, and we will be talking about them more here. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter @SeekerSkeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And you can find my skeptically themed comics at RebeccaOnPaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at Yogis Who Shave on Twitter, and you can find me bringing secular yoga to the masses at yogiswhoshave.com.
If you like what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store.
Or tell somebody you know about the show.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.